Your Excellency, Mr. President, Mrs. Katsia, ladies and gentlemen of the 1973 Chicago Israel Bond delegation, this is the 18th delegation, Mr. President, from the Jewish community of Chicago to the State of Israel, representing the mass bond effort for Israel in our city. Every delegation is remembered for something special that we do in Israel. I believe that this delegation will remember its visit and will be recorded as having been the first delegation from Chicago to have had the privilege of being received by you in your home. This is a privilege and honor which we appreciate greatly. And we're so happy too that you brought your lovely wife so that we have the opportunity of meeting her too. This, I think, will be one of the milestones of our stay in Israel. I want to assure the President, on behalf of the delegation here, as well as on behalf of the very wonderful Jewish community in Chicago, 350,000 strong, that we are totally committed to the development and progress and eternity of Israel. That this community, which last year showed its devotion to Israel through the sale of $22 million in Israel government bonds, will do substantially better this year, and we will carry away the message of our visit to Israel and our meeting with you, Mr. President. And now, if we are not imposing on you, Mr. President, we would appreciate very much if you were to say a few words, as many words as you want, Mr. President, to our delegation, so that no, we're not hinting. We have all the time in the world, and we are really looking forward to hearing from the President. This is our President. He's the President of the State of Israel, the successor to Chaim Weizmann, the leader of our people, the President of the State of Israel, Your Excellency, Professor Ephraim Katsia.
My colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, it's certainly a great pleasure to welcome you here. I can assure you that not only you, I hope, will remember this visit, but my wife and myself will certainly remember this visit as well. As you know, we haven't been in this house for a long time, so we'll certainly remember our first visitors, and mainly this distinguished group. Perhaps it's worthwhile to emphasize and to say that I, as an Israeli, almost born here, have been most of my life on the receiving end of your efforts. I tried in a modest way, and sometimes not in a very modest way, to use the money which came to Israel as a scientist, as a member of the youth movement, as a man working for many years in the Ministry of Defense. And there, I'm afraid, we used a lot of money and will most likely continue to use a lot of money. But while staying in this office now about 6 weeks, I realize more and more that most of the things that we are doing here, they are not only the effort of the Israelis, but it's a real joint effort. And in this respect, while having the opportunity to see representatives of many communities, Jewish communities in the diaspora, seeing all that they have done, all that they are doing, I feel that it's perhaps a unique example of one nation trying to build their homeland after most likely more than 2,000 years, and trying to build up a society which I hope will be an example, perhaps, for many societies all over the world. Now, I know that you are making an enormous effort, and certainly in Chicago. I know Chicago as a scientist. I have been to Chicago many times, but it's perhaps the first opportunity to meet representatives of this wonderful Jewish community in Chicago. And comparing your efforts to those of the Jews in New York, I feel that you can really be proud of what you have been doing. I know that my Israeli friends, they will never be satisfied. And while you are here, they'll try to ask you for a greater effort. And let me say that knowing what's going on in the country, let me say that I feel that this request is justified. Really, a lot is being done. And this feeling that we have no time, we have to build up the country, we have to build up our economy, agriculture, industry, education, defense. I feel that these needs and efforts being made in Israel require a joint effort of the Jewish nation, and certainly a joint effort with the Jews in Chicago and in Toronto. Now, while looking at some of the history of the Israeli bonds efforts, I came across what our Prime Minister at that time, the Minister of Labor, Mrs. Golda Meir, said when she was asked, do you have any guarantee for that really the bonds will be repaid, that the dividends will be repaid? And she humbly, not finding any better economic reason, said, look, but the people of Israel, they are the guarantee that the money will be used in the right way and will be repaid. I feel that nowadays it's perhaps not only the people of Israel. These are the Jews all over the world, that they have this guarantee to use this money in an efficient, clever, and useful way. So while you are here, I hope that you'll enjoy your stay, that you'll see what has been done and what we want to do in the country. And I hope that your ties will be strengthened, and when you'll go home, you'll be more active and perhaps do a little bit more. But not only feel that you participate in building up the economy of the country. This is a very important thing. But all my life, I have been dealing with intellectual efforts, with spiritual efforts, to a certain extent with moral efforts. And we want to be connected with Jews in the diaspora, not only by bonds, not only by profits and sometimes losses, but by sincere cultural, spiritual, moral values. And I hope that your stay will tighten also this aspect in your life, in our life. So all the best, and it's a pleasure to have you here.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is the tradition of the State of Israel that we have a great moral, spiritual, intellectual leader of our people as the President of the state. And I think the Jewish people in the world and the Jews of Israel, but the Jews of Chicago as well, are very well served by this internationally eminent scientist who has now been elected and who now serves as the President of the State of Israel. Thank you very much, Mr. President. We are aware of your efforts in the defense forces, in the upbuilding of Israel, of giving our people the kind of stature that the Jews deserve. Thank you so very much. We are also delighted that in addition to our Chicago delegation, we have with us today, this visit with the President, Mr. Eagleston, the President of the Conservative Progressive Party of Ontario, Canada. And we're so delighted that you could join the Chicago delegation this visit, as well as Mr. Unterman from Mr. Ungerman from Toronto. We're delighted that you could join the Chicago delegation in this great honor that we bestowed on us. I'm not going to call on Dr. Edward Mirmelli, so one of our prominent leaders, the Jewish community in Chicago, to thank the President for, and his lovely wife, for extending us this honor and privilege. And we shall remember that it was the Chicago Israel Bond delegation that had the privilege of being one of the first groups of Jews from anywhere in the world to be received by the President and Mrs. Katzir. Dr. Mirmelli.
כבוד אדון הנשיא אפרים קציר, גברת קציר, אנחנו היום חוגגים כ"ב שנה של המשלחת ישראל בנץ משיקגו, ויחד עם זה חג כ"ה שנה למדינת ישראל. בשם כל חברי המשלחת ישראל בנץ משיקגו אני מברך אתה אדון הנשיא. ואנחנו, ובלב מלא רגשי אהבה ושמחה, אני מאחל שתהיה מוצלח בתפקידך הנעלה לתפארת ישראל, מדינת ישראל ועם ישראל. אנחנו, חברי המשלחת ישראל בנץ משיקגו, נעשה הכל כדי לתת מקסימום עזרה בגיוס כספי למדינת ישראל, ואנחנו מבטיחים לך שנעשה הכל כדי להביא את הבונים שלנו כאן לארץ מולדתנו. אדון הנשיא, אני מברך אותך ומאחל שתהיה חזק בתפקידך הגדול. Let's try. It'll be a little bit hard, see? I didn't speak Hebrew for 40 years, but I tried. Your Excellency, Mr. President Ephraim Katzir, Mrs. Katzir. Today is a great and joyous day for us. We are celebrating the 18th mission of the Chicago delegation of Israel Bonds. We are very inspired by your presence and will do our best to multiply our efforts to achieve greater success, not only financial success, but we'll try our best to bring our sons, our children to this beloved country, our homeland. And I hope and pray that under your administration shall be recorded that total peace was achieved for Israel and for the Jews all over. May God bless you, and may all your dreams come true under your administration. Thank you.
With the permission of the President, our photographer, Mr. Ilani, will take some pictures. And I've asked Mr. Rosen to arrange some of you to come up here gradually so that we can take those pictures. Thank you very, very much. Thank you indeed. So wonderful. We enjoy it. Come to the stage. Everyone will have no problem. You know, I have to get the Israeli government. I know. Never have seen you before.
here. אפשר לקרב?
No, nobody should sit so far away.
We'll bring in. It's my first visit. Long place where everyone else has been here many, many times.
No, it's still the distance is enormous.
Yes, we need you closer.
Closer.
Right.
It's better.
It's open.
That's all right.
I think the president, as an old professor, hopes that you'll all come to the head of the class. Mr. President, may I first say how grateful we are that you've afforded us the chance to come and meet you and your wife. I hope that it's early enough in your incumbency for us still to congratulate you upon your presidency. I'm the president of a very unimportant organization by comparison, and it's a great pleasure to meet somebody who is more youthful in the job, to whom I am senior in service, at least in number of days of service. I think you know that we all come from New York. We represent the Federation of Jewish Philanthropies of New York. We come out of a series of motives, not the least of which, since our federation is an organization that supports a variety of health and welfare and educational services in New York City and around New York City, that we have a special interest in comparable services here in Israel. And it's been our great pleasure, and it is with anticipation that we look forward to visits to similar organizations here, including an institution that you have rendered such distinguished service to the Institute. And as you look around, you will see not only individuals who play a role in our federation, but individuals who play important roles in institutions of all kinds that are part of the Federation organization. There are here people who play important roles in the hospitals that we support, in the institutions for the care of the aged, in community centers, in child care institutions, in family welfare institutions, people who have an interest in the educational institutions that we support, and in general the whole spectrum of our interests are represented by the people here today. And we are grateful for the chance to have a moment with you, to see the lovely new home of the President, and I hope a chance to hear a few words from you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Buttersfield, ladies and gentlemen, my wife and myself are very glad that you are here, and I hope that you'll feel here completely informal and will have perhaps an opportunity to discuss briefly, informally, some areas in which you have been active and some of the problems that we are interested in. Now let me just say that of course we are aware of the activities of the Federation, and personally I had the opportunity to spend many days in Mount Sinai Hospital, not as a patient but as a scientist, so I knew, at least from this angle, many of your activities. Now it's perhaps worthwhile to say officially that the fame of the New York City Federation of Jewish Philanthropies is really worldwide. And your activities represent a wonderful example of the possibilities of your community to help in many areas of social welfare. Now, your organization shows outstanding qualities of American Jewry and is perhaps a modernized, technically superb descendant of the voluntary but binding communal arrangements which kept Jews alive throughout the diaspora. For us, the leadership of the Federation, their activities, will always be an example of what can be done by a joint effort. Perhaps it's worthwhile, while we sit together, to say frankly some of the things that bother us here, which might be of interest to you. Now, as you all know, it's a new country, relatively. Great efforts are being done to not only to build a national home for Jews, but we are trying to build a modern society where there are no injustices made to people in the country, where people who are poor will be finally privileged and come up in their possibilities and their contributions to the country. We hope that we'll have care to sick in a reasonable way, that it will be a country with all the justice that we would like to. Now, in this respect, it's perhaps a unique opportunity. It's a young country. We don't have in this respect a burden of tradition, but there are very serious problems which we have to face in very many areas. As I'm sure that while you are visiting the country, you'll see problems which concern housing, education, medical care, social welfare, which you are used to, and you know, I believe, to solve them in a certain respect and to contribute to them. It is perhaps worthwhile to say that I feel that it is the function of a president in this country, more than perhaps in many other countries. It's the function of the president to be of some help, to keep in the country high moral standards, and to try to build a society which is a society which I feel the Jewish nation wants to have. A society where everyone has the opportunity to do what he can do best, and that his standard of living and his health and his education will be reasonable. Because of this, I'm certainly very much interested in your activities. I hope very much that you'll become more and more interested in the problems that we face, and perhaps in the opportunity to avoid difficulties which have come to many highly developed countries. So if you'll allow me, let me welcome you again, and perhaps let's use this opportunity and not deal with formalities, and perhaps have a kind of an informal discussion, if we may.
Mr. President, may I ask you a question? We've been impressed as we have become acquainted with Israel on this trip that you have certain places where you have great concentrations of social problems, where you have poverty, where you have large families, where you have housing problems, and so on. We know you have a Ministry of Housing and a Ministry of Health and of Social Welfare, But we also know from our American experience that where those people exist who have all those problems, unless there is some way that all these services are planned and integrated together in a concentrated approach on what we call those hardcore social problems, that the job is not done. Do you have some way in which all these different ministries, all these different services are tied together in a concentrated attack on those communities that have those needs?
I would say, as far as I'm aware, and let me sit down and really talk informally. As far as I'm aware, I assume that everyone can hear me and hear that. As far as I'm aware, there is not as yet a concentrated kind of effort as you just mentioned. My feeling is that the main reason was that the main efforts of the country were directed in other directions, in defense, in building up industry, building up agriculture, health to a certain extent. So these efforts, as far as I'm aware, they are not concentrated together. And just during the last couple of weeks, a report by a man called Dr. Katz was brought to the attention of the Prime Minister. It was a committee that worked for about two and a half years to try to clarify all these problems. How many families do you have with housing problems, with low standard of living, and it's a rather interesting report. And as far as I know, the government today is the intention of the government to discuss these problems and to see how to attack it in the most useful way. So I would say there are other attempts in different ministries, naturally, but as far as may we hear perhaps about some of them? Whatever you would like to say.
Our interest is really collectively is so globular that I don't know if there are any special problems that might be of interest to you. I should tell you that in addition to the general kinds of interests that I described before, hospitals like the Mount Sinai that you know, a number of people here have rather more specialized interests.